I am Elias. I want to take you into a night that is older than all our calendars. A night we think we know because we have sung about it since childhood, yet whose true hour remains wrapped in mystery like a lamp hidden under cloth. It is called the night of December 25th, the stroke of midnight that has for centuries carried the weight of Christmas, of carols and candles, of mass and manger scenes, of light shining over a small town called Bethlehem. But beneath that familiar date and the gentle glow of our traditions lies a question that has never been fully closed. Why did the Church come to say that Christ was born on that day, in the heart of winter, when shepherds huddled in fields and stars pierced the longest nights? And what? When we look at history and sky and scripture and the hearts of the early believers, might the real time of his birth have been? To search for this, we must first step into the world in which the story unfolded. The world of Judea under Roman rule. Picture a high stone fortress rising over a rugged landscape, the palace of Herod the Great. Roman eagles gleam on standards in the courts of power. Latin commands echo along roads paved by foreign engineers, while in the markets below, Aramaic and Hebrew weave together with Greek. The land is small but fiercely layered with identity. In the north, the hills of Galilee roll under a bright sun, scattered with small villages and terraced fields. In the center lie the ridges and valleys of Samaria, and in the south the Judean hills fall away toward the desert. Jerusalem rests on its own cluster of heights, its great temple glinting in daylight, rising above tight streets and crowded courtyards. Rome holds this land in its iron embrace, but it does not rule it directly in every detail. Instead, it props up client kings, men like Herod, whose loyalty is always scrutinized and whose power depends on keeping both Rome and the local population appeased. Soldiers patrol the main routes, tax collectors lean heavily on peasants, and banners of Caesar's power hang over cities that still whisper the Psalms of Israel in the quiet hours. Under this overlay of empire beats the older rhythm of Jewish life, marked by feasts and Sabbaths, by pilgrimages and sacrifices, by a longing for liberation that is as much spiritual as political. In the countryside around Bethlehem, the seasons are felt in the soil itself. The autumn rains soften the hardened ground. Winter brings chill nights, damp and penetrating, and days that oscillate between cold wind and shafts of pale sunlight. Spring bursts with new grass, wildflowers, and the bleating of lambs. Summer is dry and bright, the earth turning hard again under the relentless blaze. Shepherds live according to these rhythms, moving their flocks to where grass and water can be found. They sleep under rough shelters or the open sky, their lives simple and exposed, yet attuned to every shift in weather and season. Jewish customs around birth also grew from the land and from the law. Children were a blessing, a sign of favor from the God of Abraham. New life was received with gratitude and solemn duty. Sons were circumcised on the 8th day, their names spoken aloud for the first time in ritual and joy. Women observed days of purification after childbirth, periods carefully counted according to tradition. Feasts and pilgrimages pulled families toward Jerusalem at specific times of the year, especially in the spring and autumn, when travel was easier. These patterns formed the background against which the birth of Jesus would take shape, anchoring divine mystery in the concrete habits of real families. When later generations heard that he was born in Bethlehem, in a stable or cave where animals were kept, and that his mother wrapped him in cloth and laid him in a feeding trough, they instinctively tried to place this scene in time, not only in history but in season. Some looked at the detail that shepherds were in the fields by night and asked how likely that would be in the depth of winter. In the highlands around Bethlehem, winter nights can be cold, sometimes very cold, the air sharp and damp, with frost lying hard on stones and animals drawing close for warmth. Driving rain can sweep across the ridges, making exposed hillsides miserable places to linger. It is not impossible for shepherds to be outside then, But many scholars have wondered whether such a scene fits better with the softer nights of spring, when lambing season fills fields with fragile new life that must be watched and guarded. In spring, shepherds might well keep watch through the night, attentive for predators and dangers to the newborn lambs. Fires would flicker along the hills, each glow marking a small circle of safety in the dark. The air would still be chilly but less punishing, the sky clearer, the earth scented with damp grass and wildflower. The idea of angels appearing over such fields, of a sudden blaze of glory tearing open a calm night, seems almost to grow naturally from that picture. Yet the Gospels themselves do not give us a month or a day. They speak of days when Caesar's decrees led families like that of Joseph to travel for registration, and of nights when shepherds kept watch. They give us names of rulers, Herod and Augustus, and they describe celestial signs, a mysterious star that drew wise men from the east. But they do not say this was winter or spring or autumn. That silence is itself part of the mystery. The world of early Christianity inherited that silence and filled it with questions, prayers, and eventually choices. The first generations of believers were less concerned with satisfying our modern hunger for precise chronology and more concerned with proclaiming who this child was. For them, the meaning of his birth mattered more than the exact calendar day. They saw in him the fulfillment of promises older than any empire, the Word of God taking flesh, the light long promised to those who sat in darkness. In their minds, this event was woven into the great tapestry of salvation history, stretching from creation through the call of Abraham, the Exodus, the prophets, and the long years of waiting. As Christianity spread, especially into the Gentile world and then into the heart of the Roman Empire, the need to mark this mystery in time grew. Communities gathered weekly to celebrate the resurrection, the day of the Lord. They kept the memory of his suffering, death, and rising with deep reverence, tying it to the timing of the Jewish Passover. Over time, they began to ask when to celebrate his coming into the world. In some places, the focus fell first on the Epiphany, the manifestation of Christ to the nations, often kept in early January with a cluster of meanings: the visit of the wise men, his baptism in the Jordan, the miracle at Cana. The birth itself was present in their worship and reflection, but its date had not yet crystallized. Meanwhile, another kind of light was being adored in Rome and in other cities, the light of the unconquered sun. Around the time of the winter solstice, when days reached their shortest and nights pressed longest upon the earth, a festival of the sun's rebirth was observed. The sun, which seemed to have been swallowed by darkness, began to reclaim the sky day by day. In this turning of the year, ancient peoples sensed a powerful symbolism of death and rebirth, of hope pushing back despair. The Roman cult of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, held a prominent place in this season, gathering crowds and devotion. For early Christians, living in a world where this solar imagery resonated deeply, the figure of Christ as true light, as the day star rising in the human heart, as the light that shines in the darkness and is not overcome, carried obvious power. They heard in prophetic texts the promise of a great light rising upon those who walked in darkness. They saw his coming as the dawn of a new creation, the warmth that could enter the coldest heart. In this context, the choice of late December as the time to celebrate his birth was more than historical guesswork. It was a spiritual statement, a claim that in the deepest night of the year, a light had risen that no winter could extinguish. There is also a quieter, more theological reasoning that some early Christians explored. In certain ancient thought patterns, especially among Jewish believers, there was a beautiful idea that great prophets and holy figures entered and left this world on the same date, that the day of their conception and the day of their death were mystically aligned. In this way of thinking, Christ's death was dated to around late March, near the spring equinox, linked to Passover. If his conception was believed to fall on that same date, then 9 months later would bring us to late December for his birth. December 25th thus could emerge not from a desire to copy pagan feasts, though the cultural overlap is real, but from a deep theological meditation on the unity of his coming and his sacrifice, his first heartbeat in the womb and his last breath on the cross. When we stand with early believers in this way, we see December 25th not as a claim that they had discovered a forgotten registry entry, but as a way of carving the mystery of the Incarnation into the circle of the year. They placed his birth at the edge of winter, at the turning of light and dark, because that is what his coming meant. Even if Judean shepherds did not normally keep flocks on frozen hills in the coldest part of the year, the spiritual truth they wanted to proclaim was clear. Into the deep night of human history, into a world overshadowed by sin and empire and death, a child had been born who was light from light. The calendar became a canvas on which that truth could be painted in luminous colors. The star that the wise men saw in the east forms another piece of this tapestry. For ancient observers, the sky was not empty. It was a living script in which gods and kings, seasons and destinies were written. When a bright object appeared, a conjunction of planets, or an unusually brilliant star, it might be read as a sign that a great ruler had been born. Over the centuries, astronomers and scholars have proposed many candidates for the Star of Bethlehem, a rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation of the Fishes, a close meeting of Jupiter with the star Regulus, a comet blazing briefly and then vanishing, a nova flaring into visibility. Each of these possibilities has its advocates. Each can be matched tentatively to certain years near the reigns of Herod and Augustus. Yet once again, the gospel story does not insist on a precise scientific explanation. It speaks of a star that rose, that guided, that seemed to stand over the place where the child was. To those who first heard this, the point was not to deliver an astronomical report, but to say that creation itself responded to the birth. Heaven and earth were not indifferent. If the date was not recorded in our modern sense, the sign was recorded in a deeper way, in the conviction that the cosmos was drawn into the event. The wise men, trained in reading the sky, perceived in that light something more than a random configuration. They took the long journey westward, moving under the night vault from one desert camp to another, following a guidance that was part calculation, part faith. The shepherds, by contrast, did not follow a star across countries. They watched their flocks on nearby hills. Their lives were tethered to the land, to simple routines of grazing and protection. They knew the bite of Judean night air, the way breath smokes in front of the face when the temperature drops, the way animals shift and huddle closer. Their seasonal work placed them in the open country at night for much of the year, not only in one season. For them, an angelic appearance, a glory suddenly lighting up the darkness, was both terrifying and beautiful. The message they received turned the ordinary landscape into a theater of revelation. Hills they had known since childhood became the backdrop for heaven's announcement. Angels, in this story, are not vague, decorative figures. They are messengers, moving between worlds, carrying divine intention into human hearing. They appear in the Annunciation to Mary, in the dreams of Joseph, in the proclamation to the shepherds. Their presence marks threshold moments when heaven leans down and touches earth. The Nativity, in this sense, is not only about a baby wrapped in cloth, but about an invisible traffic between realms, about the way God chooses to speak into human history. The exact hour of night is less crucial than the fact that in the darkness of an occupied land, under the rule of distant emperors and local tyrants, voices from beyond earthly power spoke of peace and joy. The earliest believers received all of this, with hearts more attuned to meaning than to measurement. They lived close to suffering and persecution. For many of them, The question of whether Christ was born in what we now call December or April or early autumn was secondary to the assurance that he had indeed entered the world. They gathered to celebrate his birth not with historical seminars but with worship, with readings and hymns and prayers that saw in him the fulfillment of everything Israel had hoped for. Over time, as local practices developed, some communities favored one date, others another. In the western parts of the empire, December 25th gradually emerged as the principal day for commemorating the Nativity. In the East, the Feast of Epiphany in early January carried much of the weight, and only later did December 25th gain prominence there as well. Beneath these liturgical developments lay layers of spiritual symbolism. Late December, near the solstice, is a time when, in many climates, darkness seems to rule. Days are brief, nights long, the sun low. Cold, where it comes, settles deep into the ground. Ancient people felt this not only physically, but emotionally. The fear that light might be withdrawn, that harvests might fail, that life might not return with spring, haunted older cultures. To place the birth of Christ here was to say into that fear that the true sun had risen. Even if the shepherds of Bethlehem originally found him in a milder season, the faith chooses midwinter as the moment to proclaim that hope dawns precisely when the world seems most stripped bare. The incarnation, in Christian thought, has always been more than an entry point into a timeline. It is the act in which the eternal Word enters time at all, taking on human flesh in a specific culture, under a particular sky. And yet the paradox is that what happens in one night in one town also touches all nights and all towns. The birth of Jesus in Bethlehem is inextricably linked to Judean hills, to Roman decrees, to the reign of Herod, to the movements of shepherds and wise men. At the same time, it is read as an event that stands outside of chronology, an eternal decision of God expressed in a temporal moment. Because of this, the precise calendar day becomes less a fact to be correctly spotted and more a door into contemplation. When we ask what the true time of his birth might have been, historical and astronomical clues can take us some distance. We can look at reigns and censuses, at king lists and sky charts. We can argue that in the Judean climate, shepherds would most likely be out at night with their flocks during spring or autumn when grass was abundant, that winter nights might have driven more sheep into sheltered areas. We can propose that certain astronomical events around a few years before the Common Era line up intriguingly with the description of a guiding star. We can note that the date of Herod's death gives us a rough upper bound for when Bethlehem's child could have been born. These attempts are not wrong. They are part of the reverent curiosity of faith seeking understanding. Yet, they all converge on an answer that remains approximate. Christ was probably not born on the very day we now call December 25th in the year mistakenly labeled 1. He may have come some years earlier. The season may have been more temperate. The sky may have held a conjunction or a comet that we can reconstruct. But none of this can be proven beyond all doubt. The earliest disciples did not leave us a birth certificate, but a proclamation. For them, the who outweighed the when. What December 25th gives us is therefore less an historical certainty than a sacramental sign. It is the Church, across centuries, taking all she has glimpsed from Scripture, tradition and symbol and saying, here, in the darkest week of the year, we will mark the coming of the light. Here, when fields are bare and evenings long, we will gather with candles and chants and remember that in Bethlehem, under a hard sky, in a world ruled by soldiers and taxes, a child was born who carried a different kingdom in his very being. The date becomes a lens through which to feel the contrast between divine tenderness and human harshness, to walk imaginatively into that night, whether it fell in December or spring, is to walk into a fragile yet luminous space. A young mother, exhausted, cradles a newborn in a place not meant for births. A tired carpenter watches over them, listening for noises outside that might signal danger from soldiers or the night. Somewhere nearby, shepherds huddle by a low fire, cloaks wrapped tight, eyes scanning the horizon. They are accustomed to the cold that slides under wool, to the damp that creeps into their bones. They know the shape of this land in the dark. When a brightness not of this world suddenly tears the sky, when the air itself seems to tremble with an otherworldly presence, their fear is real. So is their wonder. We, centuries later, have domesticated that scene with soft lights and gentle songs. But at its heart it remains wild. The God of Israel, the maker of stars and seas, chooses to enter his creation not with visible armies or flashes of judgment, but as a child who cannot even hold up his own head. Angels, those messengers who move between realms, blaze for a moment in the night and then withdraw. A star, whatever its physical form, becomes a pointer, a clue written in the language of the cosmos that something has shifted at the deepest level of reality. And all of it takes place beneath the notice of emperors whose decrees move whole populations. Early believers saw this contrast clearly. They lived under Roman authority, under governors and procurators who could order crucifixions on a whim. They saw legions march, heard the tramp of boots on stone, felt the weight of imperial taxes. For them to say that the true king was a child born in a backwater town was a daring act of reimagining the world. To give that child a birthday in the heart of winter was to say that no darkness, however long or heavy, could cancel the dawn he brought. Their minds were not preoccupied with astronomical charts. Though they respected the star narrative, they were consumed with a deeper conviction that God had stepped into time and that nothing could be the same. When we explore the difference between historical date and spiritual truth, we are not rejecting history. We are placing it in its proper relation to mystery. The date of Christ's birth, whatever it precisely was, roots the incarnation in our shared human story. He is not a myth floating outside of real time. He belongs to a generation, to a reign, to a place. Yet the meaning of his coming far surpasses any temporal marker. If we found tomorrow an inscription giving the exact day and month of his birth, the church would receive it with interest, perhaps even joy, but Christmas would not move from winter to spring or autumn. The point is not accuracy for its own sake, but the power of symbol deepened by centuries of prayer. December 25th has become one of those symbols. It gathers into itself many layers. The Roman festivals it quietly supplanted or transformed, the theological meditations on conception and death, the natural symbolism of solstice, the pastoral imagery of night and light. For believers, it has become less about the literal weather in Bethlehem and more about the climate of the human heart. We all know what it is to have seasons when our inner landscape feels like midwinter, barren and cold, when hope seems thin as a faraway star. To celebrate the nativity at that time is to let the story of Christ's birth speak directly into that experience. To hear again that light has entered the most desolate places. The mystery of Christ's birth thus transcends calendars, not by ignoring them, but by using them as instruments. The year turns. Days grow shorter and then longer. Feasts arise and fade. Empires rise and fall. Yet the truth at the center of the nativity remains steady. In a specific night long ago, under Roman rule, in a land gripped by both spiritual expectation and political tension, a child was born to a young Jewish woman. Shepherds heard of it in the fields. Wise men saw its echo in the sky. Angels rejoiced. That moment, hidden, quiet, unrecorded by official scribes, now reaches into every season and every soul. When you stand under a winter sky and see your breath curl out like a small cloud, you can imagine the breath of animals warming a makeshift shelter in Bethlehem. When you stand under a summer sky and see stars burn through the heat haze, you can imagine Eastern travelers watching the firmament for a sign. When you walk through city streets lit by artificial lights and hear carols echo off concrete, you can recall that once the only lights were fire and star, and the only choir was made of angels and frightened shepherds. The date may not be exact, but the reality it points to is more solid than the numbers on any page. The story of why Jesus is said to have been born on December 25th is therefore a story of how history, astronomy, theology, and devotion converge. Romans honored the rebirth of the sun, and Christians quietly claimed that the true Son of Justice had risen in Christ. Jewish customs framed his birth in terms of law and promise, while early Christian reflection tied his conception to the day of his sacrifice, creating a symbolic arc that ran from March to December. Astronomical theories try to catch in calculations a star that was first seen with the eyes of faith. Angels bridge the distance between heaven and earth, not by telling us a date, but by announcing a presence. As I trace this story in my heart, I see Judea under the rule of a foreign empire. I see a small town crowded by travelers. I see hills dotted with shepherd fires under a cold or mild night sky. I see a child wrapped and laying where animals feed. I see angels shimmering at the edge of vision. I see a star burning more brightly than the others to travelers who know how to read such signs. I see early believers gathering in catacombs and simple halls, whispering prayers over bread and wine, remembering that night whenever they spoke of him. I see theologians poring over texts, searching for patterns and symbols that might fit conception to cross, birth to solstice. And beyond all of this, I see the modern world with its artificial light and crowded calendars, its skepticism and its longing, still stopping every year on that winter day. People who do not know or care that shepherds may not usually graze in December still feel the pull of the story. People who never ponder the connection between the spring equinox and the feast of the Annunciation still light candles and sing of silent nights. There is something in the human heart that recognizes in the image of a child born in poverty, under a dark sky lit by a single bright sign, a truth about how God chooses to come. In the end, to ask exactly when he was born is to stand at the edge of a deeper question. Not merely when did this happen, but what does it mean that it happened at all? The true time of his birth, in the most profound sense, is every moment in which a human heart allows the light he brought to enter. The Midnight Mass on December 25th, whether celebrated in a snowy village or a hot city, becomes a doorway into that timeless reality. The precise hour of his first cry in Bethlehem remains unknown, yet the echo of that cry can be heard in every prayer whispered in darkness, in every act of faith made against despair. So we keep December 25th, not because we are sure it is the exact anniversary of the Nativity, but because, across long centuries, it has become the day when the Church gathers all her memories and symbols of that birth into one flame. It is the day when night and light meet in a special way, when history and dream, research and reverence all bend together to point toward a child laid in a manger, toward angels standing in the cold air above fields, toward a star that once drew strangers over desert sand. The world of Judea, under Roman rule, has passed away. The shepherd fires on those hills have long gone out. The Roman eagles that once dominated the sky have fallen, but the question those early believers asked has not faded. How do we mark the coming of God into our world? So when you hear that Jesus was born on December 25th, remember that you are hearing not the final result of an ancient census search, but the flowering of centuries of faith, seeking the best way to honor a mystery. History gives hints. Astronomy offers clues. Jewish customs provide context. Early Christian writings suggest reasons. But at the center stands not a date, but a birth. In that birth, under whatever sky it fell, heaven and earth met in a way they never had before. The date we keep is a doorway into that meeting, a winter threshold we cross each year in hope and wonder. I am Elias, and I tell you that the true time of his birth is written not only in old scrolls and star charts, but in the rhythm of grace. It is written in the way light returns after long darkness, in the way a single candle pushes back the night, in the way a heart turns toward God after years of wandering. December 25th is the day the Church has chosen to gather all these meanings and hold them up, a focal point for remembering that once, in the humility of a small Judean town under Roman rule, the Eternal stepped into time. The deeper mystery is that he continues to step into our time now, into every cold season of the soul, whether the calendar reads December or not, bringing the same light that shepherds once saw reflected in a mother's eyes when she bent over her child in the dim warmth of a makeshift shelter. And all the unknown dates and forgotten details of that night melt in the presence of the one certainty that matters, that he came, and that the world has never been the same. December 25th is one answer, framed in winter and star and hymn. The true answer is larger, reaching beyond dates, beyond calendars, into the heart of every age. Christ was born once in Bethlehem, in a year we can approximate but never fully pin down. He is born again, wherever the story of that night pierces darkness and awakens hope. And so, under our own night skies, whether cold or warm, we lift our eyes and remember that at some unknown hour, under Roman rule, in a small Judean town, light entered darkness in a way that no empire could regulate and no calendar could contain, and that this light still shines, quietly, steadily, in every winter of the soul.